Greetings, thank you for joining me today. Today we're going to be making a model aircraft, a toy on the cheap. Now, those who are fans of the hobby of flying model aircraft, whether that's free flight, i.e. without electronics, or whether it's powered remote control flight, if you want to spend a little more, they'll be aware that this hobby can cost quite a bit. You can get into it relatively cheaply, but few appreciate how cheaply you can get into this hobby. Now, there are increasing pressures on the hobby, increasing pressures on the cost of living, so I thought it's worth showing how you can do it with just waste materials. So today we've got a pizza box, and we're going to show how you can take this pizza box, which should have just gone in a bin, and turn it into a toy you can fly apart for a few hours. And if you have to throw it away after that, so be it. It's all good, isn't it? Okay, so stick with me and let's have a little fun. So what do you need to actually make this model? Well, number one on your list would be tape, a roll of tape, gaffer tape or duct tape if you're posh. Basically it's that tape with fabric in it that allows you to stick something easily, cover something if you like, and it tears nicely. That's nice. A good pair of scissors. Not your family's best scissors, not the hairdressing scissors, not the scissors used to cut fiberglass, not the scissors used to cut fabric if you've got someone who's into tailoring. It's the sort of scissors you find in the kitchen that people use to cut bags, expendable, cheap scissors. You'll be cutting cardboard with these. The box, of course, maybe a ruler, maybe a pen. It's up to you. And that's the basics of it. So let's get into it. Now, before you start, of course, it's worth getting all the obstructions out of the way on your desk. If you have a mouse mat, somebody's nice mouse mat, all those other things, you get those out of the way so you've got a nice clear area to work. Now, your standard pizza box, in this case, has two nice sides which we can use, and also the sides, if they're not too crumpled, they can be used as well for support. So we've got a couple of zones we can work with. You don't have to, but I like to cut the box into sections to eliminate the muck and rubbish. Now it's got cheese on it, marvellous, isn't it? I shan't subject you to that, but I'm going to cut it into sections and we're going to work on the nice parts so you know what we're doing. I'm going to dedicate one side to the wings and the other side to the body of the plane. Yeah, that's my plan so far. I'm going to go with a small design. Obviously it's not going to be too big, but if you make the wings right, if you make it light enough, it will fly. So let's get into this. Now, by the magic of video, I'm going to cut back in a second with these parts cut up. Okay, so far so good. So we've got sides of the box. I had to throw away one side of the box because it was too scrunched up, too gooey. However, I've salvaged what I can, and we've got some nice pieces here. Now, one side of the box has these lovely vent holes, so I'm going to use these to create the pilot's canopy, basically, or something like that. That's my thought. So that I put to one side there. Of course, got the main part of the box, the two sheets, which I'm going to use to create the wings and the main body. So again, I'm going to do a little marking out and I'll cut back in again. So when you're thinking about building a plane with cardboard, in this case, you've got to think in two halves all the way through. So the plane has two wings, two tail pieces, two rudders, and there's two halves to the canopy and two halves, pretty much everything really. So looking at the canopy first of all, the little holes here will make wonderful windows. I thought I'd trace out on this sheet I folded in half where I'm going to cut for the front window. That's where I can put FPV gear, and that's what you could use as well if you build it into it. I'm going to trim that first part off that part off the front to make it kind of streamlined, and another part slightly longer off the back. Don't worry if it doesn't make a lot of sense right now, it will do. I've taken one of the big parts, the main parts, folded it in half, and I'm cutting out 2 wings. So again, it's hard to see my biro on the card, but the wing goes here. It just has to have a curved edge as far as I'm concerned. Although you might make a straight edge wing, it's just fine, it's all good. Your design, have fun with it. We've got the tail piece here, and the rudder, and another part of the tail piece that mounts the rudder. So each one of these stencils will make 2 halves of the design. So I'll cut back in a moment when it's all cut through. Okay, back in the room having done some cutting. So we've got the 2 halves, the left and right half of the main wing, and they'll stick together across the fuselage, rather like that. It's rather hard to see with this shot, because it's quite a close shot, but there we go. I'm not going to be cutting any flaps in there or anything like that. That's for a more complicated build later on. That's the wings. We've got the tail piece, which is made of 2 parts just for rigidity. It's going to need that because this is going to move to create the up and down of the plane. Then we've got the pilot's canopy, and you can see now we've got the decorative window with the holes, and in the front there's a nice space where you can put the camera if that's what you want to do. I'm going to use some more cardboard to create the overall structure to hold it all together. You'll see that as it builds. And very important, the tail, of course, or the rudder rather, for left and right movement. This is the fixed piece, and this is the rudder, which will come together and allow you to steer left and right. And that's it so far, so let's carry on. Okay, so some progress now. I like to give everything a coat of gaffer tape, which helps to fend off any moisture. If of course you land you're playing in a damp grass, it's not going to melt away. So this is one of the wings, of course, and this is the other one. I'm going to glue these together, or sellotape these together with the gaffer tape. What else? Here's a tail piece assembled. Not a pretty thing, but then it's not intended to be that pretty. It's just intended to function. So we've got the tape creating the joint. Now, if you were using something more sturdy, I don't know, balsa for example, to fashion these parts, you can cut a groove with a nice thin blade and put a piece of aluminium can, cut out of what we got. Cut a can apart like this and take a piece of that to create a hinge. The aluminium from a can will take quite a few bends before it finally starts to crack, and quite a few, I mean tens of flights frankly before it starts to become a problem. You do need quite a bit more glue though. This is just working with tape so far. I haven't broken out the glue or anything like that. So yeah, I've got a bend anyway. That's the main thing, and that's going to become useful later on in the build. Likewise, the tail. Now, as for the canopy starts to take shape. I took some more of the box and created a base for it really, and covered it in tape, and you can see it looks a bit like an alien head, doesn't it? Or a fish or something. So I've basically sellotaped it, creating this sort of structure which will protect, to a certain extent, it will protect any electronics you want to put in here, like a receiver or a servo, or in this case, of course, a camera. If you wanted to poke it through the nose, you want to give some protection to that gear, because it's a big outlay, and yeah, we'd sooner not throw it in dustbin after the first flight. So there's that. So this creates a box. Now I've taken a piece of card and added a bit of rigidity here. So it's just folded in half and then sellotape down, then gaffer tape down basically to create a ridge. And the ridge means it's quite strong this way. You can squeeze it. It holds the shape of the whole structure. So it's not going to wave around too much. I've also put a groove here in the portion that goes through to the tail. My plan is I think I'm going to be driving it from behind, but I haven't got to that point yet. But with the wings stuck on something like that, get the idea. So you've got a nice unobstructed view of the way forward with your camera. When you're running a prop in front of the camera, you do suffer a little obstruction. Sometimes there's a problem, sometimes not. It all depends on how big the prop is and how fast it's going. I prefer not to have the prop in the way, you know. So that's progress so far. I'll crack on and get back to you shortly. So just focusing on the wings for now. I've taped them together, of course, and what I've done is to give the wings a little bit of curve, because it's nice for the wings to have a shape. I've curved them by sellotaping them together, then curving them literally over my leg. You can also curve them over something, well, nice and round, like this tub here, just to give it a bit of shape, help start bending the card. Now, ideally, I'd like it to be more curved at the front edge of the wing than it is at the back. You know, as you see on regular planes, really. That means when we work with this, what we're going to do is we're going to add a thickening structure, which is also going to strengthen it. I've taken another piece of card and cut a groove with a little blade. Don't use a blade like this. This is a silly blade. But any good, safe blade, you cut a tiny groove. Don't go all the way through the card. Cut a groove in the card, and then you can fold it over more easily. So you end up with a piece of card that's got a ridge in it, a crease in it, and the crease will add strength. And you can do this a number of times. It's your call. What I'm now going to do is to tape this into place with, you guessed it, more tape. So I've stuck the ridge on, and now I'm adding a little bit of discarded popping paper, which I'm using to pad the front ridge. This means that it's less likely to just get squashed flat if you put it down in the back of the car. So yeah, and what I'm doing is to keep the shape of the wing, to keep it kind of curved, I'm putting some tape and wrapping it around the front end, and then pulling it taut to the back, so it ends up with a nice can you see the curve? Yeah, the curve like that. And hopefully it will hold it for a couple of flights. You know, it's cheap and cheerful. It gets the job done, and it's very, very light. If you wanted to do it properly, of course, you could, of course, cut shapes to go into the wing and braces to hold the shape far better. And you can see that on a plane like my Balsa one. She's looking a bit sorry, to be fair, but you can see I've cut in balsa shapes to hold the shape of the wing, and you wrap tissue around this in the case of a balsa plane. Now, poor little plane. It's got some ways to go before it's back on the back down the park. Anyway, I'll crack on. There, so not more than half an hour later, I've got a ridge, and now this thing has a curve, a rudimentary wing. So that will, yes, that will work nicely, I think. And I can at some point cut flaps into it if I want, or add flaps on the end with more tape. Okay, so having made the wing, it's time to start thinking about the way the wing mounts onto the body of the plane, onto the pilot's cabin, and also extending that cabin back until it meets with the tail and the control surfaces. So at the moment I'm thinking to give the wing an appropriate angle of incidence. I don't want it to be flat in the sky. I mean, it works, but slightly tilted works better to get a lot of lift out of it. And so that's my aim, is to do it, mount it like that, dead centre-ish, yeah, mounted like that on the pilot's cabin, which means the camera will be very, very forward within the plane, and it helps keep the centre of gravity forward. Now, when they talk about centre of gravity on a plane, the idea is that when it's in the sky, it's not weighted towards the tail, it's not weighted too much towards the nose, it's just nicely balanced, and it balances usually at a point about here on the wing, so it's just a little bit back from the leading edge of the plane, the plane wings, and that's where the centre of gravity should be. So if you were to balance it on 2 points under each wing, it will, when it's on the desk, it'll be stable, it won't tilt back or forward. A tail heavy plane will fly just the once, not well. A nose heavy plane will be kind of twitchy. It won't fly well either, but it might fly a little further, or anyway. So the aim is to have the centre of gravity just right. That's my thoughts so far. Now the wing itself should be something I can take off. I could sellotape it on, I'll be honest with you, but if I do that, then I can't get to the gubbins, which will be in the cabin itself, batteries and control servos. So I'll have to think about that one. Anyway, I've created an extension. So I bent the piece of cardboard here at the back, which tries to lend some rigidity to the tail piece, and I've cut out some more of the cardboard to make two sides to this tail, and I'm going to sellotape those in place, and then create some box sections in between to make it all as rigid and straight as possible. And then that'll lead back, of course, to the tail surfaces that you saw earlier. So I'll cut back in a moment. So I've been working on the next section of the tail, I guess you'd call it, the body to the tail. Trying to make it as rigid as possible. Now, it's only thin cardboard ultimately, so it's down to the number of creases you can put in it. Creases, where you see them here, I've created a sort of ridge within the box, and that adds strength. I've locked it in with some hot melt glue. Yes, it's messy, yes, but it's on the inside and what we've seen from the outside. And what it does is it means this structure here is going to be as rigid as possible. So when the plane is in flight, the wing's going to stay in the same orientation as they always have been relative to the tail. When the tail's applying torque to the frame, left and right, up and down and so on, this whole section isn't going to bend, because of course if it bends, then it's not going to have the same effect. It isn't going to be as finely controlled in flight. So that's the theory, just to lock it in place. There are other ways to make it rigid. You could put section of tin can in there, or your aluminium can, fold it again, and to create an extra rigidity within that. But I wanted to keep this to just cardboard to show that you can do it this way. There are other ways, many other ways. You know, it's as varied as your imagination, really. Okay, so let's continue. So I guess on this part of the plane, this would be called the elevator. It's one tail / elevator, and it's very old-fashioned in that the whole thing moves. You can arrange it so just the end of it moves if you want to, but in this case I've created a hinge which is made of tape and aluminium drinks can, and it's taped to a piece of cardboard, taped and glued to a piece of cardboard, which in turn is glued to the frame itself with hot melt glue again and more tape, because you want this to stay put, and it allows it to wiggle and stays put once it's in place. It's kind of nice. You can angle it up and down, you know, to suit, but the cans will accept quite a bit of bending before it finally starts to crack. That's the nature of the aluminium can, and you can see it taped on there. Next, I'm going to apply the rudder. I've got to make sure also that there's not much in the way of electronics that are going to go in this section, purely because I don't want to put too much weight in the back of the plane and ruin the centre of gravity. It's all going to be in this section. That's where I think I'm going to put the servos, and the battery will go in the front with a control gear. But I've got to create a trough, an area where control wires can go. Now, when I say control wire, you just need a nice stiff piece of wire, and traditionally that would be a piece of piano wire. Very stiff, but anything like that will do. And of course, you know, you've got to use a bit of ingenuity if you're working on the cheap. Piano wire isn't necessarily cheap. It's not the most expensive thing to get, but if you're just messing around with a bit of box, you might not want to even invest in that. So bit of old coat hanger wire or something from packaging. I'm sure if you look around you'll find an awful lot of things that will work. It really just has to stay rigid when it's pushed and pulled, because it's going to create a mechanism for the servo, which will sit here, to move this up and down like that. Okay, let's move on.